Hello, everybody. My name is Josh Bass. Thank you so much for coming back to the table. I am your host. Thank you so much for the support on the past couple of episodes. It really has meant a lot for everybody listening, commenting. I really do appreciate it. And especially a big shout out to my previous host, Dr. Granddad, as I call him. That was a lot of fun. And so I really do appreciate him sitting down with me, and shout out to everybody who reached out to me. I really appreciated seeing all the kind words that you guys sent me. So welcome to the table. Let's pull up a chair. Let's talk. Let me ask you something, and don't answer it too quickly. Who are you when no one's watching? And yes, you, I'm talking to you. Not the version of you that knows how to read the room, or the version of you that blends in just enough to stay comfortable, but the real one. Because if we're honest, most of us have gotten really good at just adjusting who we are depending on where we are. And so I want to take a few minutes before we jump in today and explaining the heart behind this little series that I'm calling Chameleon. It's not just a catchy title. It's a mirror. A chameleon survives by blending in. Whatever environment it's placed in, it adapts. It changes color, and changing color can cause it to disappear. And the more that I've thought about that, the more I've realized how much that instinct shows up in us. Most of us didn't wake up one day and decide, I want to lose my convictions, or I want to drift spiritually. It usually happens quietly. Little compromises, unchallenged patterns, learning which parts of us are welcomed and which ones are better kept hidden. So over the next 4 episodes, we're going to talk honestly about what it looks like to live as followers of Jesus in a world that constantly invites us to blend in. And so here's where we're going. Today, we're going to be talking about the problem of conformity. Next week, we're going to talk about identity, what it means to be chosen. Then we're going to talk about responsibility, being an ambassador. And then finally, we'll land on embodiment, imitating Christ, especially in love. And this isn't about behavior modification, okay? It's about transformation. And transformation doesn't happen by accident. Paul puts it plainly in Romans 12:2. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And that verse assumes something very important here. Conforming is the default. Conforming is the default. Transforming is intentional. And no one has to teach us how to do it. We learn it early on. What do I have to do to get approval? What do I do that gets silenced? What gets rejected? And eventually, many of us decide it's safer to adapt than to stand out. There's a story about a 16-year-old Salvation Army kid walking to church in uniform. On the way, he passed a group of classmates hanging out near a pool hall. They laughed at him, mocked him, threw rocks at him, not because he was being loud or because he was aggressive, but he stood out. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Most of us don't avoid standing out because we don't believe. We all believe something, and a lot of us are very passionate about what we believe, but we avoid it because we've seen the cost of standing out. Think back to high school, or honestly, any place where fitting in felt necessary or felt like survival. You tweak your personality. You soften convictions. You mirror the room, and for a while, it works. But the community you gain that way is fragile because it's built on pretending. And the hard part is this. You can do the same thing spiritually. You can belong everywhere and be known nowhere. You can have a whole group of friends and coworkers that don't know your faith. Paul isn't calling us to be strange for the sake of being strange. He's calling us to live honestly before God. Now I'm going to move to chapter 4 of John. And let me slow this story down for a moment, because if you didn't grow up in the church, it's easy to miss just how radical this moment is. In John chapter 4, Jesus is traveling through a region called Samaria. And that detail matters. At that time, Jews and Samaritans did not associate with each other. There was deep cultural, ethnic, and religious hostility. Most Jewish people would actually go out of their way, take longer routes just to avoid Samaria altogether. But Jesus doesn't avoid it. He actually stops there. And while he's resting by a well, a Samaritan woman comes to draw water. And most women would come to draw water in the morning or, close to nighttime because noon is the hottest part of the day, but she doesn't come with anybody. She goes by herself at noon. And that alone tells us something. She's likely avoiding people. She's probably avoiding conversations or even avoiding judgment. And Jesus does something completely unexpected. He speaks to her. And in that culture, a Jewish man did not speak publicly to a Samaritan woman. And yet Jesus initiates the conversation. He asks her for a drink and then begins talking to her about something deeper, what he calls living water. Eventually, the conversation turns personal. Jesus says to her, "Go call your husband." And she responds with, "I don't have a husband." And Jesus gently, but honestly says, "You're right. You've had 5 husbands. And the man you're with now is not your husband." Now it's really important to hear this correctly. Jesus is not exposing her to shame her. He's not calling her out to embarrass her. He's naming the pattern that has left her thirsty. And then this is the key. He offers her something better, living water, a life that actually satisfies. Transformation begins when truth is spoken in love. And maybe that's uncomfortable for us because many of us would rather have Jesus affirm our patterns than confront them. But he confronts them because he loves us. There's another story in John chapter 5 that helps us understand this idea even more clearly. Jesus goes to Jerusalem where there's a pool. And around this pool, people are sick, injured, disabled, and people who've been waiting a long time for healing. And among them is one man who has been invalid for 38 years. 38 years. That means his condition isn't new. It's familiar. And it's become part of how he understands himself. Jesus walks up to this man and asks a question that almost sounds strange. Do you want to get well? At first, that feels obvious. Of course he does. Of course we want to get well. But listen to how the man responds. He doesn't say yes. He explains why he can't. He talks about the pool, the obstacles, the people who always get there first. In other words, he's fully conformed to his situation. His identity has been shaped by his condition. And Jesus interrupts that narrative. He doesn't help him to get in the pool. He doesn't fix the system. He just simply says, get up, pick up your mat, walk. And in that moment, the man is healed. And here's the uncomfortable part. Sometimes healing requires us to let go of the identity we've built around our brokenness. Sometimes healing requires us to let go of the identity we've built around our brokenness. And Jesus still echoes this question today. Do you want to get well? Or have you grown comfortable with what's familiar, even if it's killing you? And at this point, I want to name something clearly that I feel like it's important. That's really important. This isn't just about self-improvement or breaking bad habits. The reason Jesus can confront patterns, the reason he can offer living water, the reason he can even heal at all is because of who he is and what he came to do. Jesus didn't come to a world that already looked like him. He came to a world that had fully conformed to broken patterns, greed, pride, violence, self-preservation. And instead of blending in, he stood out perfectly. He lived the life we couldn't live. He loved without condition, and he obeyed without compromise. And ultimately, he was rejected for it. Jesus went to the cross not because he conformed to the world, but because he refused to. And on the cross, he took our sin. He took my sin. He took my shame. He took all of my broken patterns upon himself. And in doing so, he made a way for real transformation, not just behavioral change, but heart level renewal. The gospel is this: you do not transform yourself to earn God's love. You are transformed because God loved you first. And that invitation still stands. Not to clean yourself up, not to pretend, not to blend in, but to come as you are and be made new. The thing about the gospel is that you do not have to get up and walk before Jesus will come to you. You don't have to clean yourself or put that thing down or stop doing that before Jesus will love you. But you can come as you are and you will be made new. So let me ask you again, not as pressure, but as an invitation. What patterns have you normalized so long that Jesus might want to heal? Where have you blended in so long that you've forgotten who you're supposed to be? Jesus isn't standing at a distance waiting for you to get it together. He's standing right in front of you, asking the same question he asked in John 5. Do you want to get well? In the next episode, we're going to talk about identity, about what it means to be chosen and why that changes everything. Until then, sit with that question and let it linger. Do you want to get well? Thank you for pulling up a chair to the table. I'll see you next week.